Washington Journal continues.
We want to welcome Bruce LeVell. He is the executive director of the National Diversity Coalition for Trump, which is what?
Which is a huge, well, I should say a big responsibility, but it's a lot of fun. I got to start it in 2015, and thanks for having me, Steve. It's good to be on the #1 show in the world.
We're glad to have you, believe me.
Real journalism, all right, finally. But yeah, it's ndctrump.com, and just to give you a little background about it, it was founded by Michael Cohen, who's was executive vice president of Trump Enterprise, and it started back in 2015 with Pastor Darrell Scott, and it was basically put together for obviously to combat this unfortunate false narrative that they tried to put on candidate Trump at the time, and we noticed that there were a lot of different diverse groups from around the country. And so, it's like, where's all this coming from? Here we have a 70-year-old man who's announced for president, who has been in should I say, the public eye for 40 years. I mean, Steve, I was like watching a 1989 Ghostbusters video with Bobby Brown. I saw President Trump in there, or Home Alone when he walks through the lot. He's been David Letterman, all the other shows, contact with hundreds of thousands of people in his career, and not one person would come forward to validate, well, he said this about me, he said this. So, this coalition was put together to put all these beautiful, diverse people from all over the country. And we wanted to have a landing area to voice our opinions, or voice our support for him, to say, no, where are you getting this from? And we're a million plus, followers here since 2015, and we represent from Haitian Americans for Trump, for African American pastors for Trump, Vietnamese Americans for Trump. The list goes on. It's ndctrump.com, and it was a great experience to meet all the people across the country that totally denounced that false narrative on the president. So.
Let me put two issues on the table, if I could. First, health care, because right now we know that there are 2 Republicans who will not vote for the bill. Will it come up on Tuesday? Will the president get his repeal and replace?
I'm very optimistic, and I hope so. And for me, Steve, I speak not being paid by the administration or paid. I am one of 28 million business owners in the country. I own my own business in Atlanta, Georgia. I have employees. I also understand what I went through from paying a premium of $812 a month to $1,790 a month. Amongst many, many millions of other business owners who are suffering under these astronomical premiums. So the answer to your question, I am very optimistic, but you got to remember too, at the current state right now of, should I say, our local elected, or our elected officials now that we have in D.C., there are some who were birthed through their electoral process through being funded by special interest, and some unfortunate bad lobbyists, not all, who helped them get to where they're at. So there's still a lot of favors and things that they are beholding to. And so I think, I've watched a lot of different opinions on this particular subject, and I think people forget about what the current state of some of the elected people we have in office now.
But do you think the president is doing enough to campaign for this? Because even if you can criticize the Affordable Care Act, Barack Obama was out campaigning for it. We really haven't seen that from President Trump.
Well, I think he has. I think, it kind of campaigns itself. For example, since its inception, here we are 40+% increase in our premiums. So in terms of the American people and the pulse, or the job creators such as myself, we feel it. The 20% increase in the last 2 years of premiums. And it's, unfortunately, Steve, it's going to explode. Now, there's one thing interesting on this subject. I remember during the campaign, President Trump, he said that, as soon as I get elected, I'm going to jump out the gate and immediately attack this, instead of historically letting it just die and saying, well, see, I told you it was those Democrats. He was that passionate for the American people to come out immediately. If you saw, that was the first thing right out of the gate when he was sworn in, that he immediately jumped and put that out there. And obviously it got in the South, as we say, boogered up when the caucus got involved and this group got involved, and it didn't pass. So, but with that being said, it is a work in progress, and I'm very optimistic that it's going to pass.
Our guest will be with us for the next 25 minutes. We welcome your phone calls. The number's on the bottom of the screen. You can also send us a tweet at C-SPAN WJ. Let's talk sports. The NFL, the NBA, and the president's comments.
Wow, sports. Which one? You know,
when the president goes after the NFL players who take a knee,
right.
You got the response from LeBron James, who called him a bum.
Right.
The disinvitation of Steph Curry to come to the White House. The statement from the Golden State Warriors. We now have a new debate on this Sunday that is focused on what the president is saying and how the NBA and the NFL have responded.
Well, let's start with the young man for San Francisco. The president has always been very passionate in terms of how he feels about his veterans. It's been very clear, Steve. Obviously, you saw one night during his campaign, he raised $5 million for his veterans. You know, he's very, very passionate about the veterans. And to, you know, this is the way I look at it. And I happen to know quite a few NFL players. They were some of my neighbors back in Atlanta. And I've actually had some dialogue with some of the former NFL guys and some of the folks I know. And when you work for someone, or when you go take a job with someone, you agree to the terms and conditions. And it's okay. I'm a First Amendment advocate. I really am. You know, I love the fact of that we can go out and disagree or agree in this country. But when you work for someone, or you agree, like, hey, I'm going to go play for the Atlanta Falcons. Now every time we walk out on the field, we do this, we line up, we stand on the field, we say the national anthem. These are the things we do. Okay, where do I sign up? So therefore, you're an employee to the employer. So you agree to the terms and conditions. Now, I think it's unfair for one person out of the majority of the people or the players who want to honor the flag. The flag represents all faiths, all believers, non-believers. That's what makes the flag so awesome. And I am a little biased. My father was a 2-tour Vietnam vet. My wife's dad was a 2-tour Vietnam vet. 7 of my uncles go back from Korean War to World War I. So I grew up in Fort Hood. So I have a rich history of, you know, our military and what the flag stands for. And President Trump is very passionate about that. So he can be just as passionate too. Just because you're president or governor or whatever you are, your passion flows wherever you're at. So it was unfortunate that this young man used his employment as an employee as a platform for his disagreement amongst, I wish, if you're going to do that, write your own check. Form your 501(c), find out what that issue is that's troubling you, and bring it to the table for discussion. I think it's unfair to put it on national TV on another employer's dime.
Well, here's what the president said on Friday evening from Huntsville, Alabama. It's a short.
When somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired.
But some have said that that is not a unifying message, that the president is too divisive.
Right. Well, like I said earlier, I look at it as just passion. I think this is something that I've noticed since President Trump came down the escalator in 2015 at Trump Tower. I really believe, Steve, that a lot of people thought that, okay, this is the campaign message, and once I become president, now I'm going to put on a different hat. No. Everything that we're seeing is consistent on what President Trump, which was candidate Trump at the time, has been saying all along. So it doesn't surprise me, but you know, everyone articulates their passion differently, and President Trump has been very consistent on his passion. And you know, it was hurtful to him. Were the words strong? Yeah, they were strong. But everyone articulates their passion differently, and so I don't think that just because you know. For me, for example, hypothetically, as a Christian, I don't just go to church on Sunday and like do the Christian thing and leave out on Monday and then put on a different hat. It's who I am. It's who someone is, and I think that's why me amongst millions and millions of people who follow and support the president is why we don't want his Twitter to go anywhere. Because regardless of how it comes out or what we agree or disagree about it, is the fact that this is authentic for us. And this is the should I say, the lifeline to the American people on him speaking and us speaking back. That's our direct line to him of transparency.
Our conversation with Bruce LeVell. He is the executive director of the National Diversity Coalition for Donald Trump. He's a graduate of Central Texas College and also studied at the JFK School of Government at Harvard. Let's get to your phone calls. James, Santa Cruz, California, Democrats line. Thank you for waiting. Good morning.
How are you guys doing today? Anyway, I was calling to see about this thing. Why are they trying the diversity thing? Everybody knows it doesn't work so far. I don't know a place it does. Do you guys?
In terms, and thanks for the question, James. I'm sorry I could barely hear you. I apologize. In terms of, you mean the diversity towards the actual campaign coalition, or I'm trying to get more specific.
No, period.
Well,
it's just.
Do you mean diversity? Period. Well, let's take it from a campaign perspective. For example, when the coalition was formed, when you look at the numbers in terms of the votes, in terms of the minority vote for President Trump, he got 28.9% Hispanic vote, and he got 9+% African American vote. Now, that is the largest voting bloc for a Republican candidate since Richard Nixon, and climbing. And so I say, yes, it is working, and I speak that on behalf of the Republican Party and as well as the coalition for the president, that we are making tremendous strides and gains based on the numbers that he delivered during the November election.
We'll go to Chris in Cleveland, Ohio, independent line. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Steve. Good morning, Bruce. How are you guys?
Hey, Chris. Good morning.
Good morning. Great show this morning. You know, I just wanted to comment that the whole business about the flag and whether we have freedom to kneel or so on this is all really a distraction. In the truest sense of the word, President Trump, and I know this word is volatile, but he's in the truest sense of the word, the president is really a fascist. If fascism is the marrying of government with business, the president, by and large, is a businessman. That he's built his whole empire on business, and he understands that. So this is a distraction. Tweeting about Colin Kaepernick or any of this stuff is a distraction from the real issues. And I'm a parent of two children in active duty service, and the bombast towards North Korea and Iran and the things that the president is doing to distract the American people by talking about the NBA and the NFL, it's a distraction. It's a shell game. Really, it's about business and the almighty dollar. And I think if we look back through history and look at the Bush family, the Carnegies, and all of the other wealthy establishment families, it's always about business. And I think we need to wake up to these distractions. That's what they are distractions. Thank you for taking my call.
Chris, thank you. Bruce LeVell.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the question. You know, I think it's interesting because, you know, I started in this, should I say, being involved in the party since I was 18. I volunteered for Ronald Reagan in high school, stuffing envelopes, actually. And it's a very interesting, you know, in terms of social media, in terms of how we're electing our elected officials, et cetera, and what type of resources we have in social media. You know, it's interesting because, I respectfully disagree in terms of not being a distraction. I think at the end of the day, the way I know the president is the fact that he's speaking like you would have just regular American citizens who tweet each other about different issues or whatever. And so he's part of that base. He's part of that conversation. And I think he's really trying to push back. And I said this earlier throughout the campaign, is that you can't take a traditional playbook and put it to President Trump. He is just wanting to communicate just like everyone else does back and forth. I do know in terms of him being passionate about pushing back and putting everything back into the American people's hands, as well as not trying to, for example, the tax and making it easier for a lot of the small businesses. the sanctions that we got voted twice, 15 to 0, and getting China and Russia on board to put a tremendous amount of pressure on Kim Jong in North Korea. Those are very big achievements. And so I don't think he's just saying something to be calling a distraction. I think that he is being who he is and being authentic and transparent. And we're like 9-10 months into his presidency, and we're still trying to should I say, stop trying to put him in a traditional playbook that we have that we've watched historically from Republicans and Democrats, respectfully.
A couple of tweets, just want to get your reaction. This is from SFR saying, President Trump loves America, the U.S. Constitution, our troops, and the flag. Says so out loud. The left will have none of that. And then this from James, who said, would anyone who would have been allowed to continue their call after calling President Obama a fascist? Your thoughts?
Well, I think is absolutely correct on that tweet. He is, like I said earlier, he is very, very deeply passionate about this country and his military. You saw how he's been a tremendous in terms of his leadership, who he appointed for the VA and reorganizing the VA and helping some of the veterans. We're still dealing with a lot of PTSD with our soldiers we've been in war for 15 plus years and counting. And I think at the end of the day, his passion is so intoxicating. It's so passionate that he really wants to make America safe again, as you might say, and make it safe so we can have a great democracy. And, I think there's, I think what it is that people have still yet to grab their arms around it, to embrace the fact that what you see is what you get. And I always like to say, from day one, it's like a marriage, it's for better or for worse, and we'll take all of it, but at least we know that it's extremely transparent, and that's what the base admires about the president, is his transparency and his authenticity. And I think that's going to play a big role in this presidency, where people are going like, well, I may not agree, but he was very direct with us about it. So
we'll go to Billings, Montana next. Republican line for Frank, talking to Bruce LeVell. Good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to Bruce LeVell.
Good morning, Frank.
I'm a very old man, and I've been a Republican a very long time, and I am so disgusted with the Republican Party. It's disappointing as hell to bring these fellows on like Bruce, and he hasn't given a direct answer to anybody that asked him a question. And herein lies the problem. They're all just in it for the cash. And to presume that President Trump is some great leader based on his emotion is to presume incorrectly. And I'm sorry for you, Mr. LeVell, that you have to put yourself through this for a paycheck, but that's what you chose. And thanks so much for C-SPAN.
Frank, thank you. We'll get a response.
Well, thanks, Frank, and thanks. Montana, you guys have the awesome moose meat up there. I love it up there. Thanks for the question. Well, I think for me, Frank, is that, well, first off, I don't get paid. I don't work for the administration. I'm not paid by the Trump campaign or anything like that. I'm one of 28 million business owners around the world who are around the country, the U.S., that are tired of high taxation, government overreach. I experienced it in 2008 in Atlanta having the worst bank failures, as well as Nevada, Las Vegas, where TARP money was induced in our private sector banks and forced some of our community banks out of business. And, the list goes on. In terms of the Republican Party, I'm very optimistic, and I'll tell you why, Frank. I've been a chairman before the GOP out in Georgia for 5 years. And right now, you saw what happened in West Virginia. You saw the Democrat governor said, I'm sorry, I can't do anything else for you. I really think that I would be more helpful in the GOP. The other thing, too, about that is that we have $80+ million in our war chest in terms of the RNC that's had record numbers under Ronna McDaniel's leadership. The second part of this is that the Democrat Party is 3.4 million in debt. So I'm more optimistic about the GOP. You got to remember too, Frank, that what you see in terms of the leadership is what President Trump has been saying all along. And interesting enough, even Bernie Sanders was saying special interest group, pay to play. President Trump pushed back and didn't accept any money from lobbyists or special interest groups and denounced super PACs all during his campaign because he knew that he wanted to be totally clear of not having or beholding to any other special interest group. So, sir, I respectfully disagree, and I'm more optimistic on the GOP in the future because of that simple thing. The other thing, too, is that when you speak against special interest and, should I say, pay to play groups that want to influence candidates, I think what's going to happen in the next couple of years, it's going to evolve and it's going to resurrect maybe people like yourself out in Montana that might want to serve on city council or state house or state senate or your school board and take the same type of attitude and passion and formula to say, I'm going to run for this seat, but I'm not going to take any money from any special interest group or lobbying firms so they could have, or so they can think they could have some kind of favor for me on a vote of something I want. And I think I said this earlier in our conversation with Steve, is that I think that's a very important thing to think about. And I hope that the conversation gets back more on the table, because what you see in some of the gridlock on both sides of the aisle, respectfully, Democrat or Republican, not just going to beat up Democrats on TV, is you have people, there's for example, you have 4 Democrats who altogether have 120 years of office combined. And, the unfortunate part about that is that most of them, not all, were birthed through the special interest and lobbying companies who put them in office so they can control him or her. So I think this is, I'm very optimistic in the next couple of years, and my prayer is that other folks from down balloting across the country will come out and do the people's will and not do the will of whoever gave them the biggest money to get them in office.
We'll go to Port Jefferson Station, New York. Chris, Democrats line, you're on the air. Bruce LeVell is here in Washington.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning.
Is it Chris? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple of things. I mean, there are a lot of things that are saying that on our facts that he didn't take a donation. He took donations from the NFL owners, like $1 million from that guy, $1 million from him, $250,000. Then you're talking about the Affordable Care Act that repeal and replace, that jumped up, 400% or something. When I lost my job, I was taking coverage. My coverage was almost $1,400 a month, and I was a diabetic. My copay for my insulin, $900 1 month. After Obamacare, my copay is $45 for 3 months for my insulin. All my medication, $6, and you know what? I'm paying I think around $400 a month. I'm more than happy to pay. I'll pay $1,000 a month as long as I'm covered for my medication, and God forbid there are emergencies, I'm covered for that. I'm fine with that.
Chris, you were breaking up a little bit, but we got the essence of the call, which basically he's been able to get better care under the Affordable Care Act at a lower price.
Yeah. Well, it's and my condolences on my mother passed with diabetes. It's very dear to my heart on people who have diabetic situations. Chris, this is the way I look at it. I remember, and a lot of times when I come on different shows and I talk about it, I usually try to articulate what I've had through life experiences. I'm in my 50s. I've had my own business for 27 years. I have employees. I remember in the 90s when I would bring people on board, I would lay out the health coverage plans and they would pick one. And I have always been and always felt in my heart that I really felt the private market should always drive the cost of health coverage, but make it so competitive where it's not so astronomical to where we do have, because you got to remember, Chris, the highest tax increase in the country, in the world, has been Obamacare. Now, with that being said, I really respectfully believe that if we push back and make it more and put it back more in the private sector and more in the capitalist market that we are, it will drive the price down based on competition. But the more we regulate it, the more the insurance companies find different ways and loopholes to avoid, which creates more astronomical premiums. That's not to say that your premiums won't jump astronomically. So I think at the end of the day, I'm very optimistic in terms of what Graham and their bill that has. It's a proactive solution. Unfortunately, sir, the way it's headed right now, as I said earlier in the conversation, to have a 40% increase in most of the American citizens' premiums